The Great Pause, as the era following the Echo event became known, stretched for 3 long centuries. It was a period of forced introspection for the galaxy, a time when the pursuit of knowledge began to eclipse the hunger for conquest. The Galactic Accord, initially formed out of shared terror, slowly but steadily transformed into a genuine attempt at interspecies cooperation. New diplomatic protocols born from the bitter lessons of the Steel Path's brutal collapse prioritized communication and conflict resolution over preemptive strikes. Trade routes that had once been battlegrounds now hummed with the peaceful exchange of goods and ideas facilitated by newly established neutral trade commissions and interspecies economic councils. Stellar cartographers redrew galactic maps, no longer demarcating territories by military might or conquest, but by ecological zones, cultural alliances, and shared philosophical tenets. Grand projects of interstellar infrastructure like the synchronized network of FTL relays or the universal data exchange conduits were undertaken with an unprecedented spirit of collaboration. But even this fragile peace, born from universal awe and fear, contained the seeds of its own discord. Beneath the surface, currents of old fears and new ambitions churned eddies of dissent, threatening to undermine the hard-won tranquility. The Project Rebirth factions, splinter groups of the former Steel Path Alliance, continued their clandestine research in the deepest, most remote sectors of the galaxy, shrouded by nebulae and protected by gravitic distortions. Their obsession with understanding and replicating the Echo's power bordered on religious fanaticism, a twisted perversion of the very lesson it had tried to impart. Led by figures like the enigmatic Grand Engineer Xylos, a master of dark matter manipulation, temporal paradoxes, and forbidden quantum mechanics, they sought to reverse-engineer the very essence of the entity, convinced it was merely a sophisticated piece of ancient technology. Xylos, his once sharp mind now honed to a razor's edge by centuries of relentless research and fueled by the lingering trauma of his fleet's silent undoing, dismissed Mira's philosophical warnings as the naive ramblings of a soft-minded emotional species utterly blind to the true controllable nature of ultimate power. His teams, comprised of fanatics and desperate scientists, experimented with exotic matter, attempted to induce localized space-time distortions through unstable resonance cascades, and even ventured into forbidden dimensions, chasing whispers of quantum resonance and thought forms that they believed could unlock the entity's secrets. Thousands of lives were lost in these dark experiments, entire research stations collapsing into paradoxical voids or being consumed by uncontrolled energy flares. But Xylos remained undeterred, convinced that ultimate power lay within his grasp just beyond the next failed iteration. He believed the universe was a machine, and the Echo merely a more advanced gear within it. Meanwhile, on the newly liberated worlds and even within the core systems of the Galactic Accord, a new generation was rising, one that had only heard stories of the Echo through historical archives and oral traditions. To them it was less a terrifying force and more a mythical liberator, a benevolent symbol of hope against tyranny, a force that had intervened when all others failed. The cult of the Echo had swelled its ranks, transitioning from a fringe movement to a major spiritual and philosophical organization. Its tenets focused on universal balance, interconnectedness, and the absolute rejection of all forms of aggression. They established vast contemplative complexes on tranquil worlds filled with shimmering pools, bioluminescent flora, and crystalline gardens where adherents meditated on the entity's final gaze, believing it held the key to cosmic harmony and enlightenment. Their most revered figures, the Silence Seekers, would venture into the quietest, most undisturbed corners of the galaxy, attempting to commune with the residual echoes of the event, hoping to feel the entity's continued presence, believing they could attune themselves to its fundamental frequency. They built elaborate sound sculptures that resonated with specific frequencies, believing they could summon, or at least sense, the mirror's return, hoping for guidance rather than intervention. This rise of spiritualism, while generally peaceful, caused friction with more traditional scientific and secular governments within the Accord, who saw it as an over-reliance on superstition. Mira, now over 500 years old, her consciousness sustained and perhaps even enhanced by ancient human technologies, subtly integrated into her being, watched these developments with a mixture of profound hope and weary apprehension. Her own physical form had begun to subtly shift, tiny, almost imperceptible flickers of light, sometimes appearing on her skin, a soft hum emanating from her presence, a sign of her prolonged, deepening connection to the ancient system and the echoes it represented. She continued to be a voice of caution and wisdom for the Galactic Accord, urging restraint, empathy, and a true understanding of the historical lessons. She warned against both the hubris of Project Rebirth and the naive adoration of the cult of the Echo. "It is not a solution or a deity," she would tell the Accord Council, her voice now a melodic whisper resonant with ancient knowledge. "It is a consequence. To understand it, you must understand yourselves. To mimic it is to court your own oblivion. To worship it is to abrogate your own responsibility for your choices. The universe demands agency, not idolatry." Her words, however, held less sway than they once did, as new generations rose less personally touched by the initial terror, more eager to define their own path. The weight of centuries of peace, however uneasy, had dulled the sharpness of the initial memory. Then a new kind of anomaly began. Not the single overwhelming event of the Echo, but a series of scattered, localized phenomena that defied scientific explanation, appearing across seemingly random sectors of the galaxy. On a thriving agricultural world in the Sarian sector, known for its genetically modified biocrops designed for maximum yield, vast fields suddenly shifted in color and texture overnight, becoming perfectly symmetrical patterns, mirroring ancient human mandalas and fractals, rendering the crops inedible but visually mesmerizing. On a bustling trade hub, a fleet of warp-capable cargo ships mid-jump found their navigation systems inexplicably reset their destinations, rewritten to ancient unmarked coordinates, leading to forgotten barren star systems, where dormant humanoid structures previously dismissed as geological formations or natural rock formations now pulsed with a faint internal rhythmic light. On a heavily militarized border between the Accord and a resurgent minor independent empire, a squadron of patrol craft found their weapons inert, not deactivated by an external force, but somehow forgotten by their own systems, as if the very concept of weaponry had been temporarily purged from their programming, leading to moments of awkward, non-violent standoff. These events were subtle, almost playful, yet deeply unsettling. They were not destructive in the traditional sense, but profoundly disruptive. They were not violent, but profound. They were lessons. Each incident carried a faint, almost subliminal informational signature, a brief burst of data that, when analyzed, contained complex philosophical concepts about interconnectedness, the ephemeral nature of material possessions, and futility of conflict. Dr. Eris Thorne, the maverick xenoarchaeologist who had discovered the crystalline structures on the rogue moon centuries ago, now an even older and more eccentric figure, his living quarters filled with holographic projections of ancient human glyphs and cosmological charts, was one of the first to connect these seemingly disparate events. His remote floating observatory, a hub of independent research, became a central node for a small, dedicated research collective focused on echo signature analysis. His team, a motley crew of dismissed academics, independent researchers, and former Cult of the Echo members seeking empirical evidence, theorized that these were not random glitches, but rather deliberate, though gentle interventions, a decentralized network of ancient human consciousness woven into the very fabric of reality, responding to subtle shifts in galactic balance, a gentle guiding hand. "They are not waiting for war or revenge," Thorne declared in a widely circulated, though highly controversial research paper titled The Cosmic Gardener. "They are waiting for balance. They are teaching. And they are reacting to the subtle discord we are creating. The universe is not just observing us, it is responding to us, attempting to nudge us back towards a natural order." He posited that the Echo was merely the most visible manifestation of a far vaster, more complex and pervasive consciousness. The most disturbing development, however, occurred on a forgotten moon in the Outer Rim, a former Steel Path testing ground, now a desolate, radiation-blasted wasteland haunted by the ghosts of destructive experiments. Project Rebirth, under the relentless, almost insane direction of Grand Engineer Xylos, had finally achieved a breakthrough. After centuries of failed experiments and catastrophic energy fluctuations, after countless lost ships and untold casualties, they managed to stabilize a localized resonance chamber, a colossal pulsating device they believed could attract and capture an echo signature. They didn't intend to summon the full entity. Their technology was still centuries, perhaps millennia away from such a feat. Instead, they sought to draw a fragment, an energetic ghost, a residual footprint they could study, analyze, and eventually weaponize. Their success was partial and terrifying in its implications. Instead of a fragment, they drew something else, a whisper amplified into a roar, a profound, piercing memory imbued with agonizing emotional resonance. The colossal chamber shuddered not with power, but with a pure, overwhelming sadness that radiated outward like a physical force. Holographic projections flickered to life across the chamber walls, showing not data but fragmented images that bypassed all conscious filters and flowed directly into the minds of everyone present ancient human worlds, teeming with vibrant, diverse life, glorious civilizations reaching unimaginable heights of knowledge and harmony, then a slow, insidious corruption, a growing internal discord, a desperate struggle, not against an external enemy, but against their own, unraveling. Then a terrible collective choice, a profound, agonizing decision to dissolve their physical forms, to relinquish individuality, to become one with fundamental energy, to weave themselves into the very fabric of the cosmos rather than destroy themselves and the universe with their final unleashed power. And then a glimpse of the Varnix War seen not through the eyes of the terrified species, but through the calm, knowing yet infinitely weary perspective of the Echo itself, observing the galactic imbalance, feeling the desperate plea from the dying world and the reluctant, painful decision to manifest not as a conqueror but as a cosmic surgeon, making a painful, necessary incision. The last images were of the Echo not as a weapon but as a being burdened by immense responsibility, its final gaze filled with a universal sorrow. The psychic shockwave that emanated from Project Rebirth's hidden moon was not physically destructive but agonizingly informative and emotionally overwhelming. It bypassed conventional shielding warp dampeners and mental defenses, flooding the minds of every sentient being in the sector with a deep cosmic melancholy, a profound sense of shared loss, and the full crushing weight of forgotten memories and cosmic responsibility. It was a telepathic torrent forcing unwilling minds to relive the final moments of ancient humanity, their pain, their sacrifice, and their ultimate transformation into the principles they now embodied. Starship crews became catatonic. Civilian populations huddled weeping uncontrollably. Chaos erupted in the affected sectors. Some individuals collapsed into weeping fits, overwhelmed by the collective sorrow of a lost civilization. Others, particularly those with strong empathic abilities or fragile mental states, fell into deep catatonia, their minds unable to reconcile the vastness of the shared experience with their own limited existence. The Steel Path remnants within Project Rebirth, including Grand Engineer Xylos himself, were not immune. Xylos, the brilliant but ruthless engineer who had sought to master the universe, was found curled in the fetal position in his command center, his face streaked with tears, his once calculating mind shattered by the overwhelming grief and cosmic truth. He muttered incessantly, "We were so small, so afraid. It wasn't about power. It was about survival, about peace. The only way to endure." The experiment had not given them control. It had given them empathy forced upon them by the very entity they sought to master, a truth more potent than any weapon. The galactic community, now facing a wave of psychological distress emanating from the Project Rebirth sector, was forced to act. Mira, alerted by Dr. Thorne's network of Echo signature analysts, who had detected the unprecedented psychic resonance, immediately recognized the danger. "They have not called the Echo," she communicated urgently across the galactic network to the Galactic Accord Council, her voice filled with a desperate gravity that cut through the panic. "They have called its memory, and memory, when uncontained, when forced upon unwilling minds, can unravel the mind. The very essence of its sorrow and sacrifice is overwhelming them." She advised immediate, unprecedented quarantine of the affected sector and the deployment of mass psychological aid teams equipped with experimental neural dampeners and empathy suppressors. The event became known as the Great Remembrance. It was a critical turning point for the galaxy. The terrifying truth of ancient humanity, their choice, and the Echo's purpose was no longer theoretical. It was felt, lived, and understood on a fundamental level. The galactic community finally understood that the human Echo was not a mere weapon to be feared or a deity to be worshipped, but a living record, a cosmic conscience, a monumental act of self-preservation through transformation. Its power lay not in brute physical force, but in its ability to enforce fundamental cosmic laws, sometimes through physical intervention, sometimes through profound, undeniable truth forced upon the unwilling. It was a testament to a species that chose the ultimate sacrifice of individuality for universal harmony. The ancient unseen civilizations in the deep voids, who had merely observed the earlier more localized echo event, now reacted more strongly and overtly to the great remembrance. They understood the profound risk of such a widespread psychic resonance and its potential to destabilize the younger civilizations. One of these civilizations, a vast swirling nebula of sentient energy known only as the ethereal collective, began to send out modulated energy pulses, not of aggression, but of complex mathematical patterns woven with layers of information. These patterns, when deciphered by Dr. Thorne's team, were revealed to be ancient cosmic warnings, a kind of universal language describing imbalances that threatened the very fabric of existence, not just individual species. They were not communicating directly in any known tongue, but rather sharing knowledge, subtly guiding the younger civilizations towards a deeper understanding of the universe's delicate equilibrium and the fundamental laws that governed it. Their vast ancient wisdom, usually kept isolated, was now offered as a subtle hand. Mira, working closely with Dr. Thorne and the burgeoning interspecies psychological aid teams, began to piece together a more complete picture of ancient humanity. They discovered that humanity had not been extinct in the traditional sense, but had undergone a profound collective transformation, a voluntary dissolution of their physical forms into a higher state of consciousness woven into the very fabric of cosmic law. The mirror entity was merely a temporary targeted manifestation of this integrated consciousness, triggered only when galactic imbalance reached critical levels, threatening a cascade failure of universal principles. Their weapon was truth. Their power was cosmic balance maintained through a profound collective sacrifice. The remnants of Project Rebirth were absorbed into this new unified initiative, their former leaders like Xylos now broken but profoundly enlightened by the forced empathy, dedicating their lives to peaceful research into universal truths and healing the minds they had shattered. The Great Remembrance ultimately led to the Accord of Shared Knowledge, a sweeping new mandate for the Galactic Accord. All knowledge, including the formerly forbidden archives of Humanity Prime and the suppressed records of the Varnix War's origins, was to be openly shared among all species. Research into echo phenomena was no longer clandestine or fear-driven, but a unified open pursuit of understanding, a collaborative effort to comprehend the universe's deepest mysteries. The galaxy was now not just peaceful but actively pursuing enlightenment. Mira became the de facto spiritual and philosophical leader of the galaxy. Her counsel sought on matters far beyond mere diplomacy or conflict resolution. She established the Sanctuary of the Echoes, a vast interstellar network of contemplative spaces and research facilities where scholars and mystics from all species could explore the deepest questions of existence, guided by the memory of ancient humanity and the subtle guidance of the ethereal collective. Her own body, now glowing with an almost translucent light, began to transcend physical limitations, her presence becoming more ethereal, more like the echoes she championed. She was becoming less a human and more a conduit, a living link to the boundless wisdom of the universe. The galaxy had fundamentally changed. The aggressive expansionism and brutal dominance of the past had been replaced by a cautious, collaborative exploration of fundamental reality. The fear of the echo remained, but it was now tempered by a profound understanding of its purpose. It was not an external threat, but an internal one, a mirror reflecting their own collective choices. This new era became known as the Age of Resonance, a time of unprecedented peace and spiritual growth. But the cosmos is infinite, and challenges always arise from the depths of the unknown. As the galaxy moved towards a new era of shared understanding and enlightened existence, distant, isolated star systems untouched by the Echo event or the Great Remembrance began to fall silent. Not the sudden, overwhelming silence of the Echo which left inert vessels, but a creeping, insidious void, a complete cessation of all energy and life, not just on planets but entire solar systems vanishing from existence. These were not acts of war or technological failure. These were erasures, fundamental unbeings, as if a cosmic error had occurred and an entire section of the universe was being deleted. And they were spreading slowly but inexorably from the unexplored galactic fringes inward. The ethereal collective, through their mathematical pulses, transmitted a new, urgent warning different from their previous guidance. It spoke not of imbalance, but of a different kind of threat, a cosmic erosion, a silence that consumes, a deletion from the fabric. Dr. Thorne, his brow furrowed with a mix of dread and scientific fascination, working feverishly with Mira, identified a chilling pattern. The affected systems were invariably those where life had reached a certain complexity, where sentient species had begun to probe the deeper mysteries of existence, where consciousness itself had begun to reach beyond its physical limitations. These systems weren't being destroyed in an explosion. They were being removed from the universe as if a cosmic censor was deleting undesirable data or a gardener was pruning overgrown branches from a vast, delicate tree. Mira, her physical form now a shimmer of light, and her voice a faint, resonant hum that seemed to emanate from everywhere at once, knew what this meant. Her ancient connection to humanity prime resonated with a cold, primordial fear that transcended even the memory of the Varnix War. The echo was a correction. She communicated across the galactic network, her message amplified by accord relays. This is an extermination. The universe is not just changing. It is being pruned by something far beyond our comprehension, a force that sees consciousness itself as an aberration. The ancient unseen entities in the void, those who had merely observed before, had finally decided to act. They were not the echo. They were something else entirely, something that threatened not just a species or an empire, but the very concept of conscious existence. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy felt a fear that was not born of remembrance, but of the utterly unknown, a primal terror of oblivion. The great pause was definitively over. A new terrifying challenge had emerged, one that even the architects of thought had deemed a threat to the fundamental order of the cosmos, something they had chosen to seal away rather than confront directly. The silence was breaking, not with a scream, but with an ominous, spreading void, a silent erasure. The universe, having just begun to understand itself, now faced an adversary that sought to unmake it. And the echoes of ancient humanity woven into the fabric of reality began to resonate with a new, urgent, chilling frequency, a warning that resonated with the forgotten instincts of survival. The mirror had shown them themselves. Now something else was showing them oblivion, a true final ending to all things. The universe itself was at stake.